my big one is that people voted for the immigration crackdown. I don't. There are aspects to it that I don't love, but to just sort of not participate in it or to treat it like it's illegal or something like that. I don't know. I'm having a little trouble understanding that.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
And I'm Owen.
I'm joining you guys from the road today. I don't know if going to visit my dad in Austin, Texas counts as being on the road, but we're going to go with it. And this week, we've got another installment in our Who the Hell series. This one's about Matt Taibbi. But before we get there, we've got a couple shout outs to give for our newest platinum members of the Patreon. You go to patreon.com/postingthrough it, get a bonus episode every week. But for those who give a little bit extra, one of the perks is a shout out. So we've got Mark Malloy.
I know him.
Mike,
I know him very well.
Yeah,
wonderful man.
You wrote, I know him in all caps.
I know him. I've been to shows with Mark.
What's up, Mark? And we've got Zach Lutz. Thanks so much, guys. So we're joined on this episode by Eoin Higgins. He was on the show previously, earlier this year. Really great episode. But today, he's joining us to talk all about the subject of this episode, Matt Taibbi. For folks who maybe hadn't heard that previous episode, Owen, could you introduce yourself to the kind people of Posting Through It?
Yeah, my name's Eoin Higgins. I'm a writer, journalist in New England, and I wrote a book called Owned, How Tech Billionaires on the Right Fought the Loudest Voices on the Left. It's a kind of a study of Silicon Valley tech billionaires, how they went to the right, and it uses Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi as kind of the way to kind of explore that, like their journey to the right and kind of the way that the money kind of came after that, and specifically right-wing tech money, and how their politics either changed or maybe accelerated, I guess, to the right, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, good book. Check it out.
Absolutely, I highly recommend it.
So you learned a lot about Matt Taibbi when writing this book, and we're going to go over a lot of it today. This episode leans really heavy on the work you did for your book. So if people are listening to this and they think, wow, Mike and Jared sure sound smart, this episode is all Owen. He deserves all the credit for this rabbit hole we're about to go down on.
I've been in the Taibbi mines.
Yeah, Taibbi mindset. Before we get started, Owen, I just want to kind of get your take on why an episode like this should exist for Matt Taibbi, because the previous characters we've covered in this series, people like Jack Posobiec and Laura Loomer, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, these are like bona fide right-wing hate mongers in most cases. People that have these just like very weird, gross backstories that are at the forefront of like some of the nastiest shit on the online right. And I don't think Matt Taibbi really falls into that category, but he does matter a lot to the political right these days. And I just want to hear your take on why he's somebody people should learn about.
Yeah, I certainly would not put Matt at the same level as Candace Owens or Laura Loomer or any of the number of people who you have covered.
Anthony Cumia,
certainly not Anthony Cumia. One of a great episode, very disturbing. But I would say that Matt is an interesting and important figure because he's kind of at the forefront of this post-left kind of these guys who've done a pivot from being like liberal left darlings in the media and are now on the right and kind of doing this partisan Republican, I guess, commentary, punditry. He certainly doesn't report anymore. And I think that, Glenn Greenwald is similar to this, but he's a more complex and interesting figure. You can listen to the last episode that we did together when we talked a lot about Glenn and that, and not really so much about Matt at all. I think that Matt matters because he represents that kind of subsection of people. But I think that rather than being the type of person who, like Glenn is, he's kind of really just completely sold out and become just a mouthpiece for the right. And he has kind of simultaneously built his career on being this kind of like hard charging, left-wing, muckraking reporter, calling it like it is, like on the left, but calling balls and strikes, happy to push back against Democrats. Not really like a both sides kind of person. Not like saying both sides are equally bad, but saying, hey, there's enough to go around. There's enough criticism to go around, and he has pivoted from that. And of course, we'll go into why and the process of that happening. But he's pivoted from that to essentially being a toady for right-wing power and a just sycophantic ally of the GOP.
Right. And he's kind of symbolic in that way, I think, because he was and is pretty famous for a journalist. He's probably the most well-known journalist. I mean, it's a field that doesn't really attract a lot of name recognition, particularly in print, right? Broadcast journalism is one thing, but this guy's a print journalist that a lot of people knew about. Everybody was, Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi said this, and Matt Taibbi said that. Even, really going back to the Obama years, I think he was really well known. And now all of a sudden he's, like you said, a mouthpiece, right? But again, to emphasize, he's not a Nazi, as you would say in the colloquial sense. He's something entirely different, and therefore, sort of a pivot from some of the other people we've covered on these biographical episodes.
I think one thing that you could say is that he is the type of person who, and I don't know if this is necessarily intentional or a goal of his, but he's the type of person who is able to attract an audience of, kind of independent thinking, maybe, kind of left-leaning people, but like independent thinkers, right? Who then will be fed these kind of laundered far-right talking points by Matt, and then eventually may end up in the Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, etc. Kind of milieu, like they'll be kind of more open to hearing those arguments. And so I think for that reason, obviously I would not call him a Nazi. I want to be clear about that. I wouldn't call him that level of far right, but I think that he does act as kind of like a gateway drug to that.
And I think he's also, just one other thing is I think he also reinforces their ideology too. It's not that you have to necessarily start with Matt Taibbi and wind up somewhere else, but if you come from the right, you can look like here. This is a guy you trust, and he says this, so therefore that, right? I think that's part of the role that he plays.
So we're going to talk a lot about Matt Taibbi, but first, we have a quick word from a sponsor. Sound off if this has ever happened to you. You're at home for the holidays. Maybe you've brought along your new trad girlfriend to meet the folks. Things are going well, and you remember this epic and based deportation meme that you saw on X, the Everything app, the day before. You're scrolling through your photos on your phone until you find it. Yeah, that's the one. Uncle Sam high-fiving a Pepe the Frog while a starving immigrant child cries. You show it to your folks, but the table goes silent. You think, what just happened? Now everyone's upset. Your mom's choking back tears. It's hard to make out what she's saying, but it sounds, it's like, why? And how did this happen? Are you okay? Your parents remind you your childhood best friend was Hispanic, and they keep asking, what's going on? What's going on? Things are going south pretty quick, and you decide to leave. Months go by. Nothing. Your sister finds your X account and asks you, what's a totally nude groiper? You try to explain, but she's just getting more upset. I mean, lately you feel like even the dog's giving you dirty looks.
It might make you feel alone, like there's no one out there that really appreciates your worldview. You might start to question yourself and wonder if you really have strayed from God's light. As your Aunt Charlene put it, well, before you sit down with those questions too long, I'm here to tell you there's a place where you belong, and that might be in the federal government of the United States of America.
You're based. You're pilled to the gills. Sure, you could go to therapy, or you could get paid with a job in the communications department of the Department of Homeland Security. No experience required. And that was a parody ad from our Executive Club member, Matt. It was pretty good. I hope I did the idea justice.
Well, it's sort of about Paul Ingrassia, right? Who is apparently now back, right? He's just got a new, they're brought him back for a new position in the administration.
Oh, dude, I just remember reading that story about his mom going around Capitol Hill and being like, he's a good boy. So I guess she got to somebody.
Yeah, well, with that out of the way, let's get started and try to figure out who the hell
is Matt Taibbi?
It's 1970. The country has seen an outbreak of protest against the Vietnam War. These would grow so intense eventually it would push the hands of U.S. politicians. In New Brunswick, New Jersey, Matt Taibbi is born. Oh, and tell us a bit about his early life.
Yeah, he's born to two 19-year-old college students, Victoria Whelan and Mike Taibbi. Mike will later become a NBC reporter. His parents were pretty young when they had him, obviously, and they split up. He was raised mostly by his mother, who brought him up, I think, generally in the Boston area. She attended law school at night. And he's kind of, it's interesting because Matt has had what by any accounts would be a privileged upbringing. He doesn't deny this, but he does kind of tend to intimate and imply at times that there was some struggle in the beginning, which allows him to kind of speak for the working class. This is my interpretation of the way that he talks about this stuff. He then has some teenage rebelliousness as he gets older. Can totally relate to that. And his parents sent him to the Concord Academy boarding school. Now, this is a pretty prestigious New England boarding school. If you're familiar with the New England boarding school scene, they're all kind of prestigious.
I can't say that I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's
a nice place.
It's exactly what you would think it is. You know, I mean, it's all of the cliches about New England boarding schools are there for a reason. And he said of being sent to Concord, quote, "I was confused, lonely, had an authority problem, had really lost my way in adolescence, and this was a solution for all of us." So it does seem to have kind of straightened him out. He also worked for a time with a crew of demolition workers. He said of this, quote, "I had gotten in some trouble. My parents' very creative punishment was to make me do hard labor with a lot of tough guys in Boston. In the first crew I worked with, all my coworkers were black, and some of them were work-release prisoners from Deer Island jail in town. One of those guys gave me some advice on my last day of work. He said, 'Don't go out like a sucker.' I don't know if that's really my great ambition in life, but it's a good story, and I still do think about it." And the thing is that I think that is kind of his motivation in life, because that's basically the most Gen X thing imaginable.
I have two questions. One is a statement, one's a question. The first one is Mike Taibbi for NBC News. I don't know anything about him. I mean, I never thought of Matt as like a Nepo baby in the journalism world by any means. I just didn't think about him that way. Was he like a very successful, reporter? Did he have, is there anything about this guy that was well known? Or, does he ever talk about him as sort of being like growing up in a family of journalists?
He doesn't talk about him, but I think that, yeah, I mean, Mike was pretty successful. I think he may have won some awards. At the very least, he was relatively well known, and I think that it would strain credulity to think that he didn't on some level, right, like help out his son to get a foot in the door. To the extent of how much like that is Nepo baby or not, it kind of depends on the way that you see it. But I think that getting your foot in the door because your dad's in the business and you have some like built-in familial connections is one thing. I think getting kind of like a really easy ride the whole way because of your family connections is another one. And I think that no matter what you can say about Matt, his journey was not that kind of like smooth.
That's
journalistic.
kind of the way I was feeling. Like he really wasn't like that. And of course, he had a very distinct writing voice, which I think is what carried him most of the way. But I just wanted to ask about that because I didn't know. And then the other thing you mentioned about the class issues. I mean, Friedrich Engels and people like that did not necessarily have a claim to the working class, but were very concerned about it. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have to have that. Then you have people who really do have a working class background, and then they use it to, justify fascism. Anyway, that's just something I wanted to point out.
So Matt Taibbi, as a teenager, he's getting rebellious. His parents send him off to boarding school, make him do hard labor. Then he goes to college. Where does he go?
So he goes to NYU, and that does not work out for him. The reason that it doesn't work out for him is that he found himself, quote, unable to deal with being just one of thousands of faces in a city of millions. And he wanted to be kind of, I guess, a bigger fish in a smaller pond. So he transfers to Bard College in Red Hook, New York. This is just north of the city. In large part because the wilderness, quote, looked like paradise. Personally, I find this openness about his narcissism kind of endearing because I find it relatable, kind of like I get like where he's coming from on that. Like you're 18 years old, like you want to like, you're going to school and then you're just one of like millions of people that can be intimidating, especially coming from a small town like Boston, and you're like in New York and it's just like big and like it's different. And I think that for someone in their teens to early 20s, New York can be a lot of things, and for some people it can be intimidating and it can kind of make people feel uncomfortable. So I get like why he went there. He goes to Bard, and while he's at Bard, he goes to the USSR on an exchange program, or I think at that point, I think it was still the USSR, but it was kind of in the process of collapsing into the kleptocracy, the unfettered capitalism that it was going to be for most of the 90s. So he finishes college in St. Petersburg, and he returns to Bard for graduation in 1992. He goes right back to Russia from there.
So he just 180, something about Russia draws him back. What was that? I mean, I don't think if you stopped many people on the street and it was like, if you didn't live here, where would you live? They'd just be like, the motherland, Russia, is where I would go. I mean, as a journalist, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that might be fascinating, but what's Matt's story? Why does he go back?
I mean, yeah, I think it was just really exciting. He just wanted to be there. He wanted to be in this country as he was undergoing this massive change. And that's what he tried to do. He tried to find work as a journalist. I mean, that was his number one goal. His secondary goal was trying to write a novel. He gets a job at English language Moscow Times. I mean, like this is he went back. I think when you're 22, 23 years old, and you have an opportunity to be somewhere that is undergoing this kind of huge, massive historical change. I mean, why wouldn't you? I completely get it.
It sounds crazy interesting. I mean, there's 1,000,001 stories around every block.
No, yeah. I mean, I've done reporting abroad in India. I mean, one of the more exciting things about being in India at that time was just like there was just so much construction and change. Like it was like every city was growing and changing in like this extremely accelerated way. And you felt like there was a story to be found around every corner. That would be the reason I would imagine you would find it there. Although I'm sure it's a different situation than that.
Yeah, I think there was like, I think it was all of that. And I think there was just excitement. I mean, it was chaos, right? Like there was excitement. Obviously, we covered like the journalistic side of the excitement, but I think there was excitement for being a young man there as well. Like this was a place where there other people your age are starting businesses or militias, or they're leaving. They're trying to take advantage of, like, there's just it's complete, for lack of a better term, like this kind of Wild West feeling that's there. Like there's no, it's just completely anarchic. There's no government really. Like everything's about money, and there are tons of Americans there who are just basically feasting on the corpse of the USSR at this point, just tearing all of the flesh off of it. And I do understand the motivation to go back.
So he does that for a few years. Then he goes to Mongolia. What's he doing in Mongolia?
A few years later, he's living in Mongolia and he's playing professional basketball in the Mongolian basketball league.
Pause.
What?
Yeah.
Hold on. You said he's playing professional basketball in Mongolia?
Yeah, so he's playing
everything you know about it. Throw it at me right now.
So in the Mongolian professional basketball league, he is one of the players. He's a professional player there, and that's just what he's doing. He gets pneumonia though while he's there. It's a cold place, and he almost dies. So then he moves back to Moscow, and he joins the tabloid living here.
The safest place to live after you almost die in Mongolia is to go directly to Moscow.
Yeah. He fled to safety.
Did he bring the ball up? Do we know anything? Is he a point guard, shooting guard? Like, is he like what?
Can he dunk? How tall is Matt Taibbi?
He's pretty tall. I think he's over 6 feet.
Do we have like free throw stats?
We should reach out.
I don't have his stats. I think if we can get them though, that'd be great. Yeah. This is him in an interview that he did. He said, he'd been playing basketball. One of the guys he was playing with was Mongolian. Quote, so we got to talking. He told me there was a league called the NBA, Mongolian Basketball Association, that was the only other pro league in the world with NBA rules. Quote. So he quits his job. He goes and he has a tryout with the Mountain Eagles in Mongolia, and he makes it. And yeah, he said that he was a national celebrity. He also says that he was dyeing his hair different colors, like Dennis Rodman, leading the league in rebounding, getting in fights. So,
fascinating.
Anyway, so he gets pneumonia. He goes back to Moscow and he joins the expat tabloid living here, where he meets Mark Ames.
Yeah, you got to tell me a little bit about who Mark Ames is, because I think I probably represent a lot of the audience who either some people have never heard of this guy, or they're like me, where they never really looked into who he is and just see he's got this avatar on Twitter, or what, like now X, where it's just sort of a very slack looking face, right? Where it's like kind of gray with like big eyes. And like that, I would always see him, and it would used to be like, he was like posting a lot about, I guess, left-wing takes about war, I remember originally. I don't know if it changed from there, but that's always kind of like the vibe of that guy.
Yeah, his profile picture, I believe, is by Ted Rall. It has that look to it. And Mark is I would call him kind of like a cantankerous, older lefty. He's older than Matt. I believe he might be like 60 at this point. He's very much the Gen X writer type. He had already been in Russia when Matt got there. He's a little bit older, like I said. He moved there.
Who do you think toppled the USSR?
Is it,
it might have been Mark Ames, but we're not sure.
It would certainly be a good episode of War Nerd, which I think he appears on pretty often. So he starts editing Living Here in 96. So Taibbi is there, and Ames leaves to found The Exile. The Exile is meant to be like a competitor to Living Here, a kind of satirical tabloid that it takes a harsh look at the American expat experience in Russia, right? So the intention, the stated intention of Living of The Exile was to really like send up a lot of the vulture capitalists and whatnot who were there and who were, like I said, picking over the bones of what was left of the state and society in the USSR. And so they approached it that way, and The Exile was an expression of kind of like almost like an alt weekly, right? But it also it was obscene. It was certainly offensive by today's standards and by the standards of the time, but it was also highly regarded because of how it was sending up this stuff. Because there was I think on the part of a lot of the people who were in journalism at the time and a lot of the audience, there was an understanding on their part that what Ames and Taibbi were doing was kind of coming from a place of wanting to expose this stuff, right? So I'm not making a judgment on it either way. I'm just saying that that is the way that it has been described to me when I was researching the book and even before that.
So it's raunchy. It is poking at power, at conventions, at what at the time you would call political correctness, that sort of thing. But you have written here, and just what little I know about the exile, it was very, kind of tongue in cheek. They would openly write about doing a bunch of drugs, hooking up with random women in Russia. Some of that we're going to talk about later. And eventually this all falls apart. What happens? What the exile is showing this promise. It's getting regard from a certain audience, but I don't think it's still around today, is it? I mean, the exile, I haven't heard that in forever, and it's always been in reference to this golden year 20 some years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely not around anymore. I'll get to why that is, but I think that the first thing to understand is the reason that Ames brought Taibbi on was because if Taibbi stayed at living here would be a more effective competitor to the exile. I mean, that's how well regarded at that point Taibbi already was, right? So he brought Taibbi onto the exile, and Ames was the bad cop, Taibbi was the good cop, and Ames would write more hardcore subject matter like death porn, a column that recounted police reports of murders and suicides, and horror stories, review or guide to the Russian prostitution industry by way of sex workers. Ames said that he had hired. So there was certainly that. They were doing lots and lots of drugs. They were partying super hard, and I think you can kind of see where any partnership like this, if there's just tons and tons of drug use and hunger for fame, and it's doomed, right? It's on a collision course.
It gets referenced a lot in the context of it being misogynistic. That is what I see online, that type of criticism. I haven't read it to know myself, but that's what people allege, particularly critics of Taibbi and Ames.
Yeah, so it was pretty misogynistic, and there's a quote that I have in the book that I'll read out here, and I'll just tell the audience that this is not an inoffensive thing, right? This is pretty offensive, but
our audience can handle it.
Yes, this is Matt, 1999, to journalist Anna Blundy. So, quote, "Look, Anna, I hate to break this to you, but as a man who appreciates a good conversationalist as much as the next guy, and given a choice between sleeping with Alice B. Talkless, that's a famous feminist, and a brainless bimbo with a shaved snapper and melon-sized tits, I'll take the bimbo any day. And you know what? So will every other man in the entire world. I mean it, all of us, 100%. Call us shallow, but that's the deal. The fact is, Russian women with their tight skirts, blowjob-ready lips, and swingy, meaty chests scare the hell out of Western women. They know that if large numbers of them were ever to invade the placid, polite, lesbian literature and designer coffee dating scene of their home countries, they'd be priced right out of the market. Russian women may not be emancipated, which I think most of us agree is a terrible thing, but what they haven't gained in the professional world, they've at least retained in the sexual arena."
Whoa.
The number of times I have used snapper to describe a vagina is 0. But has anybody used the word snapper here? It's such a
a snapper's a fish, right?
That's a fish, bro. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, I mean, I spent part of my childhood and teenage years in Ireland, so I've certainly heard it before.
Okay,
but it's not something that you really hear in the U.S. certainly.
Well, I've been introduced to something new today. What I would say to that is, I'm sure Taibbi and Ames and whomever else are probably saying, "Hey, we were very young, right?" I mean, they were still pretty young at that point. How old would they have been?
Well, Matt would have been about 30 at this point.
Okay.
You know,
Jesus, dude.
That's too old. That's too old to get the apology out. That's pretty old.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there don't seem to be any extenuating circumstances here.
Right.
You know,
It's
but
just gross. Also, it's like, you know, Russian is not like a race; it's a nationality. But this is pretty disgusting, just about Russian women, because it certainly does not represent the many Russian women who do not fit this description he's making.
no, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't fit the Russian women who I've met, certainly, anecdotally. And considering the reaction to this that has continued to be quite negative whenever anyone brings it up, I would assume that that this is just not the case in general. So that can kind of give you a flavor that, you know, both what Ames was writing and, you know, that quote of Taibbi's. I think we'll probably do another quote or two from back then when we get to the cancellation. But that's the kind of stuff that they were writing. They were partying super hard. I think Taibbi referred to it in an interview with Ross Barkan as like a bacchanalia, that, you know, night would hit a certain point, the drugs would be everywhere, alcohol at these bars, like, you know, the floor would be just writhing with people having sex and dancing and partying. So to the extent of how much of this stuff is true, they have said that it's satire now. You know, I think that where I kind of come down on it is, yeah, okay, like maybe some of it's satire, but I think that it's obvious that they were partying pretty hard and they were doing a lot of drugs.
Yeah, one of those drugs, this is like, I don't want to give off the perception of like attacking anybody over drug use or anything. This is important because it's like part of Taibbi's lore and the story he tells about himself. When he's in Russia and they're partying, going crazy, he gets addicted to heroin, right?
Yeah, he gets addicted to heroin. Ames is also on drugs. I'm not sure exactly like what he was on at this point. You know, maybe like a mix of everything. Maybe, you know, maybe he was more into coke or you know, whatever. I'm not going to speculate. But Matt was on heroin. Their relationship was really deteriorating by 2001, and Ames leaves to work on his book, Going Postal: Rage, Murder, and Rebellion, from Reagan's Workplaces to Clinton's Columbine and Beyond. So Taibbi stays on, and he manages the exile. Ames returns in 2002. Taibbi leaves for good. He goes back to the U.S., going to Buffalo to start the Buffalo Beast alternative paper. But he also spends time doing that while he's doing that to get clean from heroin. He tells Barkan that he never like shot it. He never shot heroin, but that he, you know, he was still pretty addicted. Now,
So I mean, like he snorted it, like the Pulp Fiction.
yeah, I mean, you can snort it, you can smoke it, you can, you know,
You can smoke it too.
freebase it. I've known a lot of heroin addicts in my life. I've known a lot of people who have struggled with addiction to heroin, and you know what he's saying about it not like he was very addicted without having to shoot is certainly not something that's alien to me to hear about that. He compared getting clean to train spotting, to that kind of famous like getting clean scene there.
Relinquishing junk, stage 1, preparation. For this you will need 1 room which you will not leave, soothing music, tomato soup, 10 tins of, mushroom soup, 8 tins of, for consumption cold, ice cream, vanilla, 1 large tub of, magnesia, milk of, 1 bottle, paracetamol, mouthwash, vitamins, mineral water, Lucozade, pornography.
I know that this is jumping a little bit ahead because I know that we're gonna kind of follow Matt's journey, but just to kind of close the door on the exile stuff, it closes in June 2008. It's a victim of a political crackdown from the Putin government. The Kultura, which is the police for culture in Russia, accused the paper of violating Article 4 for its extreme content, glorification of drugs and pornography. Ames was in California. He came back. government agents came, questioned him, and then the publication just folded because the investors all pulled out. I think he had already severed ties with Taibbi at that point. He said that Taibbi had betrayed the exile.
Do we know what he might have meant by that? Taibbi
What's that?
betrayed it?
He betrayed because he left.
Oh, okay.
He left, and Ames came back, and like you said, Ames came back in 2002, and when he came back, Taibbi was out. He was out. He left the exile, and they have kind of both talked about each other in media over the years, and the overall way that I would kind of describe how they talk about each other would be to say that Taibbi seems still like he's open to some sort of like rapprochement, and Ames just like, fuck this dude, I hate him. So this guy, James Verini for Vanity Fair, interviews Taibbi in 2010, and there he's at a restaurant, and he meets him for coffee, and it just turns into this massive fight. And Verini says that the book is, quote, redundant and discursive, and you guys left out a lot of the good stuff you did. Taibbi says, fuck you, throws his coffee in Verini's face, and stomps out. So Verini cleans himself up. He goes outside, he tries to calm him down, and Taibbi yells, fuck you, did you bring me here to insult me? Who are you? What have you ever written? Fuck you. And then, so Verini's like, okay, well, like, fuck this. I'm going to get out of here. And he tries to get out, but like, like Taibbi is kind of like stalking him for like half a block after that. So this is a good way to kind of just shut the door on the exile, the Russia, the early life stuff. But just say that you kind of see that this guy has a bit of a temper at this point.
A bit of a temper and a bit of a vision of himself that is very grand and very like entitled in a way is maybe a word I would use.
Well, it's all that time in the Mongolian basketball league. I mean, you would also get a few rebounds in that league, and it's all.
You don't know who I am. Look at my clips, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
I will
team.
say I've never been in the Mongolian Basketball Association, so.
Dude, I'm not even sure I can make a free throw.
So he goes from the Buffalo Beasts to the New York Press, and I just want to just quickly interject something. New York Press was an interesting newspaper, in the sense that like you would sometimes get commentary from New York Press that you would get different from somewhere else. And I remember being at the time, although I missed the Village Voice, I used to get really irritated with the Village Voice. It had like a very like uncritical liberal perspective all the time. And at the time, during the 90s, there was a lot of tension around Clinton, and just everything was just uniformly about Clintonism, right? And the New York Press would sort of go around it a little bit. It had like an early contrarian streak. And one example of that is Armand White would do the film criticism. If anybody knows Armand White, was really brilliant at times early in his career, and then became more and more reactionary, and then completely became just like a pro-Trump critic. Even though he's a gay black man, but he that's the New York Press. It was kind of like the early contrarian thing, even though it had plenty of leftist point of views in it too. It wasn't a conservative thing. It was odd.
I don't want to derail us too much, but I would say that for the alt weeklies, right, there were always kind of like two general strains. Like one, a kind of more mainstream, maybe more like Village Voice, right, mainstream liberal magazine, and then the other kind, right? The kind that was like a little more critical, like New York Press. Metroland up in the capital region is another example of this. I would argue that The Stranger, in Seattle.
We mentioned that because Katie Herzog worked there until she became persona non grata.
Yes, and I'm not crazy about Dan Savage, but The Stranger was definitely like of the kind of, not of the Village Voice, I think, persuasion of alt weeklies, although I'm sure that some people would disagree. So if you disagree, just yell at me. Don't yell at Mike and Jared. But
yeah, we'll put Owen's handle in the description of this episode. You can go yell at him and argue.
Yeah, just.
But after New York Press, Matt goes to Rolling Stone magazine, and this is where, at least in my life, like he is writing for Rolling Stone magazine at a time that I'm in school learning how to be a journalist, and reporting the news is fun, but what I really love to do whenever I get a chance to do it is narrative nonfiction. And Matt Taibbi, for everything we're going to go through, is when he's focused and gets the space, like in a magazine story, a fantastic writer. Very vivid storyteller, just a very, people, when he was at Rolling Stone, people were like, this is the new Hunter S. Thompson. This is our generation's Hunter S. Thompson. So it's like, this is where he breaks out. Can you tell us a bit about the Rolling Stone years?
Yeah, I would say just before I do, I would just say I agree with you, and I think that it also shows the benefit of him having an editor. When he has an editor, and when he has focus,
I will say, if you read Matt's Substack today, I wonder where that writer went, because the guy I was reading in Rolling Stone, I was just like, this is brilliant. I hope I can write like this someday. But you go to that Substack, and it's just like, it's not bad writing necessarily, but it's completely unremarkable from my perspective anyway.
It's certainly not what he was doing at Rolling Stone. So he goes at the end of 2004, after Bush is reelected, he moves from the New York Press to Rolling Stone. But I think that there is one, he covers the campaign for the New York Press, and he has this experience in 2004 that I think is kind of instructive to understand like how he generally feels about journalism. And it's the social dynamics, right? So the cool kids, the established papers, sat in the front. They enjoyed greater access. And he says the most toxic thing about the campaign plane was how cool everybody thought that they were. So there's this sense of like high school social dynamics that I think that we see with a lot of these guys, that everything kind of comes back to high school. Everyone feels like they're back in high school, having to like prove themselves in the same way.
It's just thinly veiled resentment, really, I think.
Yeah.
Like that whole the high school worldview is just like resentment for people who you think have it better than you, but don't deserve it like you do.
Yeah, but I think that is an understandable feeling, and I think that a lot of people have that without it having the same high school social dynamic aspect to it, which is I think what makes it unique, with like this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. So it's not that like I don't care if something good happened to you, it should have happened to me. That's a kind of a normal thing to feel. I don't care if something good happened to you, it should have happened to me, and it only happened to you because you're friends with all of the cool kids, is a kind of more specific, like narrow thing that Matt and a lot of these guys I think have. And I think that's the distinction that I would draw, if that makes sense. He goes to Rolling Stone, he does a lot of great narrative nonfiction, a lot of reporting. His career just like explodes at this point. And then 2007, 2008 financial crisis hits. And that's when it goes to the stratosphere.
Just a quick thing to put in so you can help people understand. So he's like mostly like a anti-war Bush like type thing. Is that like where he was mostly at that time? I wasn't reading him week in and week out at that time. He's doing that. And then the financial crisis hits.
Yeah, he's definitely doing I would say that Taibbi is doing an anti-war, pro-civil libertarian thing.
Okay.
Similar to what Glenn is doing at this time.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say, because when you were on and talking about Glenn Greenwald, it's a very similar type thing. They're both in that space of just sort of like stay off of my data and my information.
Yeah, he's definitely reporting on that explicitly, like saying like, you shouldn't be like spying on us from this stuff. Like the stuff
it was an urgent perspective at that time, also, right? I mean, it was important.
But I would also say like the things that he's doing now, like this, which we're going to get into with this Twitter files thing, like the censorship industrial complex and all this stuff, like that isn't coming from nowhere, right? Like there is this backlog of like 20 years of him writing about and around this stuff a little bit. And at this point, like that's what he is doing. He's doing reporting, but he's also doing some commentary with it. And then when the financial crisis hits, then he kind of goes more into this non-narrative nonfiction commentary, but it's still reporting. I mean, what I think was really great about his writing at this time was that he was able to break down these really complicated financial concepts to a lay audience in a way that was entertaining and made sense. and I'll give him credit for that for sure. I was in college at the time, and he was not like my favorite writer. He wasn't somebody that I would consider myself a fan of at the time. But I certainly like appreciated what he did. And my friends who were more, I think, my lefty friends who were more like into the economic side of things liked him a lot more. Like they were like, "Oh, that's our guy."
And that led to a book of his. That was like Griftopia, I believe it was called, which I think is his most famous book, or at least the one that I think most people, most closely associated with him.
Yeah, Griftopia. And then he also coins the referring to Goldman Sachs as a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity, relentlessly jamming its blood funnel into anything that smells like money. I mean, he really went after Goldman pretty hard during, and like, good, fuck Goldman. Just to be clear, but this was what he was doing, and he was doing quite well. That he was selling books. He had a respected column. He could basically write about whatever he wanted. I mean, he had a lot of power here, and that's kind of the dream.
Well, we got a clip of him. He was, if you remember those big Think videos back in the day. I don't know if they still do them. Do they still do Big Think? It was a very Obama era type YouTube content, and here he is talking about comparing Wall Street to the Russian oligarchy.
I was continually struck by how much it reminded me of a lot of the dynamic that I had seen covering the Russian government and the Russian state, where there was this, the oligarchical system that they had over there. There was a very tiny collection of super connected industrial figures, these oligarchs. They were bankers mostly, and there was this circular process of government gives tons of money to banker, banker then scams the public and returns money to politicians, who in turn keep giving money back to the bankers. And that whole circular process is very similar to what's going on here in the States now, where we have, a small group of very, very politically connected banks who give massive campaign contributions to both parties, and they're rewarded with selective regulation and bailouts, and then the money comes back again.
So he's at Rolling Stone for a while, but in 2013, what happens?
So Pierre Omidyar poaches him.
And he's like a tech, has a ton of money,
Yes.
funds a bunch of, today, like a bunch of like liberal nonprofits and that sort of thing. There's a lot of organizations in the like nonprofit, especially like online research space that Omidyar supports. He does big conferences, supports journalists, all kinds of things. That's what he does with his money.
Yeah, he at this time he had just founded First Look Media, which was supposed to be this alternative media, like left-leaning media, like really like serious stuff, right? They had already approached and gotten Jeremy Scahill, Glenn Greenwald, and Laura Poitras to start The Intercept, and they wanted Matt to start The Racket, which he called The Racket, which is going to be kind of a continuation of his economics reporting, with a whole team around him.
So he's like at the peak of his career. Sounds like he's set up to do pretty good. How's it go?
Yeah, so it didn't go well. It completely falls apart. This stuff is kind of foggy, I guess I would say. I talked to a number of people who were around, involved, and tangentially involved in what went down here. The bare bones of it, I think, is that there were some accusations of mistreatment of staff. And
that Matt mistreated staff, or
that he was abusive, and not, like verbally abusive, like nothing physical, nothing beyond that. They did a full investigation, and they found nothing to really substantiate it. So they were like, "Great, let's move forward." But he was so outraged that he had been investigated in the first place, that they had dared to investigate him, that he quit before they published a word, and he went back to Rolling Stone.
It's nice that he was able to go back. I mean,
I think he's a pretty big name. I think that it was, I think he was kind of perceived by a lot of people, a lot of readers, as just a leave of absence, and then he was back. Alex Perrine had Matt's back on this one. The Intercept wrote an article about it, and they talked to people about it, about what happened. And Perrine, but I think Perrine put out a statement saying that the issue was interference by First Look in the first place, and that was really what had done it, and that if First Look had kind of gotten off their back and not gotten involved, there wouldn't have been a problem. I think there are two important things to understand here. One, that they found nothing, right? So the accusations were essentially without merit. I mean, I think that's what happened. I think it's safe to say that if you make an accusation, you have an investigation, and you don't find anything, then they're without merit. As far as it applies to the organization doing the investigation, not saying that they're completely without merit. I don't 100% know everything that happened here, but I'm saying that as far as legally and they were found not to be able to be substantiated. But I think the second thing is that he got so angry about even being challenged that he just left. He just said, "Fuck you guys." Not only said "fuck you guys" to First Look, but said "fuck you" to everybody who he had brought onto the racket. Everyone who he brought onto the racket to work with him were then out of jobs because the thing couldn't exist without him. So he basically torpedoed, I wouldn't say people's careers necessarily, but I would certainly say their paychecks for a while.
Towards the end of his Rolling Stone career, or sort of his time as a darling liberal or left, whatever you want to call it, he was getting a lot of traction by covering the 2016 campaign, particularly the Republican ticket. He would be called the Republican clown car, I think was the phrase used. And I just vividly remember the drawings of the Republican candidates. We all remember Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Trump, et cetera, and then just centering Trump and making Trump look ridiculous, sound terrible. And I remember this very vividly because my father, who was about to turn 80, would send me links to Matt Taibbi articles and be like, "Look at this. This is there you go. Another Taibbi banger." I don't think he would use the word banger, but he would be like, he loved it. And and the reason I bring it up is because it was just, it was a punchier, slightly more bitey version of MSNBC coverage in some ways. And he was that's sort of, isn't that kind of the last moment where he before departure, where he sort of starts to drift rightward?
No, but we'll get to that.
Okay. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I remember it very vividly. Just he was doing a lot of traction with those articles.
He was. And I think that, 2016 election was something that broke a lot of people's brains, I think. The beginning of Matt's shift to the right came with his rejection of the Russiagate conspiracy theory that basically dominated media after Trump was elected.
Yeah. So this is post-2016 election. The Hillary Clinton campaign spokespeople go out, looking for blame, point to Russian interference in the U.S. election, which itself is not a conspiracy. Russia did attempt to influence public opinion. This is well documented. People were indicted for it. They were trying to reach the Trump campaign. They were going online, trying to manipulate public opinion in the U.S. But it's the question is causality, right? It's yes, Russia did a lot of this stuff, but a lot of research into it, minus maybe the campaign contacts that could be open for debate. But the online stuff, at least what I'm familiar with, I think the general consensus as the years went on is, yes, they tried it, but they were incredibly ineffective. A lot of people remember the jacked Bernie Sanders meme, and it's but did that get any traction, really?
Well, that's the thing. Okay. So if you look at the numbers, they were oh, well, look at all the numbers that this stuff did. Look at us, and it's yeah, that didn't. If anybody who was in media at any point, I think over the last decade, and has had to look at social media engagement numbers would be able to tell you that like most of the stuff was like nothing. It was nothing. And a lot of like what Russia was doing at that point was the same thing that a lot of other countries, or I don't even want to say Russia, like a lot of things that groups based in Russia were doing at that time were the same thing that groups based in China, India, UK, even in the US were doing.
We do this shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like finding like,
Just look at what's going on in Venezuela right now.
Yeah.
We do this shit all the time.
But-
we do worse than this. Oh my God, dude.
but I'm saying like some of this stuff I don't even think was like necessarily like influence campaigns, or I don't really know like what to call them, but they were like they were making Facebook pages of like different like sides of different debates, but it didn't matter like what the debate, they were just doing it to get more page clicks and more attention. And I don't know if it was like an influence campaign or not, but what I'm saying is that like they were doing this, and a lot of groups in like other countries were doing this as well. And all of this stuff, but then there was like also like the Russian like intelligence was like reaching out to the Trump campaign and being like, hey, we want to like, talk to you about this and that. And all of this stuff was getting smashed in together to make this big, huge conspiracy theory of this like long, powerful plot coming straight from Vladimir Putin to put Trump into office.
A lot of that was on Rachel Maddow's show. She would kind of weave those things together. I should say that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and things to suggest that Russia or Russian intelligence did probably support some of the white supremacist groups and activities and things like that there. But we're talking about, I mean, I saw some of it firsthand, but they're, as you pointed out, we're doing things like that, or they're doing things like that. It's just more that I think Russia clearly had an interest in creating division and stoking particularly white supremacy, which was like the big thing.
Yeah,
I think that scared people a lot at that time because of what Trump was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's been their MO for the longest time, is to identify existing social divisions in a Western country that they're targeting, and then amplify sometimes not even the division themselves, but the perceptions of those divisions. They want people in those countries to think, oh my God, my neighbors hate me, we all hate each other, that sort of thing. And it has a destabilizing effect as the idea. But again, there's a question of like causality. And then there's a question of like, there's a lot of reasons Trump won in 2016. And how does that rank? I would not put it anywhere close to the top. But Matt Taibbi, to get us back on track, zeroes in on this. Right. And it makes him kind of a pariah at the time in liberal media. I mean, he went from being this liberal media darling to being the guy who's like, your favorite MSNBC host is full of shit.
There were a lot of people in the media, both people who were prominent and well known, like Matt, like Glenn as well, who rejected this. And there were other people like myself, like Adam Johnson, media critic as well, who also rejected this and were also like, this is bullshit. Like, Trump won election because this is America, and that's like...
He's the natural
that's
conclusion of
happened.
the last 5 decades of American politics. Yeah.
Right. And then, as the media hysteria around this like increased, it became this kind of like a snowball effect almost, because it was like, especially MSNBC, I think, was like the worst offender on this. Rachel Maddow, as Mike just said, was the worst of them for promoting it. And it makes sense why she promoted it, because the ratings were great, and the more the ratings were great, the crazier the conspiracies got, and the crazier conspiracies got, the better the ratings got, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But then like, as they're doing that, then like, everybody's like writing about how crazy this is. And that's like generating like back and forth thing. I mean, at this point, this is back when, like media was a lot more, I guess, like somewhat centralized, I guess, for the internet. But like, like there was like a discourse, and like Twitter hadn't been shitified by Elon Musk yet. And so into this bedlam basically is Matt Taibbi as one of the main people pushing back against this. And what happens is kind of two things. So first of all, he's kind of banned from liberal society, polite society, media society, right? He still has this column at Rolling Stone, of course, but he's not invited on MSNBC or CNN anymore to talk about his stuff. He's not He's being yelled at online, which is a great radicalizing factor
and
for
I just
people.
want to interject something here, or maybe help you to get to this point. He was also kind of associated with Bernie, like the Bernie vibe. I don't know if he was like a public Bernie supporter, but there was like a cluster of journalists who are kind of Clinton critical, just retweeted by the people who were pro Bernie. And I think that carryover gave him a kind of a hardened thing, online in his personal branding.
I mean, I think it's totally fair to say he was. I mean, Matt Taibbi was like a guest on shows like Chapo Trap House and stuff. I mean, the guy got around leftist
That's right.
media.
He was. Yeah. I don't know if he still is, but he was.
Yeah, I don't think he is anymore, but he certainly was. I mean, I think that just kind of understanding his position, and I don't want to like relitigate the 2016 or the 2016 aftermath for my own sanity here, but he's kind of banned from Lib Society, and liberals kind of reject him. And I just want to digress just a second to say, like, kind of what happens with Glenn at this point is Glenn starts to just basically be kind of anti-Trump, right? Like his perspective becomes kind of this is kind of how Glenn ends up where he is now. But he's just like, no, like if you're opposed to Trump, that's bullshit. You're only opposed to him because you're liberal slime, and like it's only because you believe in Russiagate and Rachel Maddow, blah blah blah, etc. So, but Matt is not like that. Matt is he's rejecting the I guess MSNBC-ification of the liberal discourse and the reasons that they're giving for Clinton losing, but at the same time, he's not anti-Trump. He also doesn't like Trump, and he's making that very clear. And one of the things that he does in order to kind of try to reset himself with liberal audiences is he writes a book called I Can't Breathe, which is about Eric Garner, who was murdered by police, choked out to death. And the book is about that. It's about Black Lives Matter kind of in general. And this is going to be like Matt's like re-entry into polite liberal society. And I think the book came out in like October. And so he's like ready to go. Like this is about, and then in August, Me Too kind of really drops and it becomes a huge thing like Harvey Weinstein. It becomes a national movement, right? It becomes a really, really important part of politics, and arguably like still is. I mean, the effects of it, I think, are still with us,
or at least the vicious backlash against it. I mean, he's being a dominant strain in the culture and explains like so much of the acceptance of Trump.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think that also like there are some positive aspects of it too, right? Which is that like even though the backlash has won for now, like it did kind of empower and put people into politics and feel like they could actually change.
The toothpaste is out of the tube now. Even if they're smearing it around the room, it was undeniably positive. And
so essentially what happens is that Matt is about to do his book tour, and out comes this this kind of campaign led by in part Mike Cernovich, Weird Mike, who's kind of like deploying the Me Too movement in order to smear like one of his old enemies, and this being Matt Taibbi. And so as Matt is like really like trying to reset like his relationship with liberal media, then this stuff comes out, and it is stuff from his time at the Exile comes back, and specifically this columnist Kathy Lally from the Washington Post recalls like when she was in Moscow as a correspondent for the Baltimore Sun. Just think about that the Baltimore Sun had a Moscow correspondent back in the 90s.
Remember what they took from us.
A different time. She said that Taibbi and Ames's behavior and blinding sexism often targeted me. She criticized their publication in a message board in 1998, like a private, or semi-private, message board for journalists in 1998, and they just went after her in the Exile ridiculing her, and they went after her in the memoir as well. So the attacks were there, and they were making, like, she wrote about this in the Washington Post. I mean, like, they were having some success, and Taibbi's book tour basically just like collapsed, and the Eric Garner book just kind of like it just kind of disappeared. I'm sure that it sold okay, but it just wasn't like this like kind of reset. And the thing is as well that liberals were not like willing to forgive and forget for him, because they were so mad at him about what he had written about Russiagate, that their reaction to this was to basically say, no, fuck you. Like, this is like an example of why you're a bad guy. And so this kind of like, this is the beginning of him kind of turning against liberals on the left, which I think he might have already kind of been on the path to, but this really like hyper accelerates it.
So in 2018, Matt Taibbi starts self-publishing. He moves over to Substack. His Substack has gone through a few different iterations, a few different brandings. Today, it is called Racket News, a little callback to First Look Media. And he is kind of done this rightward turn. But if you ask Matt Taibbi, he'll say that he's the same, but the rest of the world changed. There was a 2021 profile of Matt Taibbi. I believe it's called What Happened to Matt Taibbi, where he gave an interview for it, and he said, quote, "I feel pretty strongly that the only thing that's changed is that the New York media world once agreed with things I was saying, and now they don't." And he identifies the 2016 election as sort of the pain point. This is where like things started to fall apart in mainstream media and in liberal media, saying that, once Trump won, all of these publications were chasing clicks. Respectable newsrooms were going along with political commentary instead of questioning politics, that sort of thing. And that his writing, he views it as a contrast to that, which is why people get upset with it. That's what he says. But Owen, I mean, this drift to the right, he's going independent. He's writing his own newsletter. I guess my question for you is, when you were looking at it, did it seem like all at once, or did it feel gradual? I mean, he made this play to get back his liberal media friends, media partners, acquaintances, whatever you want to call them, and he is just rejected, right? Even though Matt Taibbi does not fit the mold of other Who the Hell episode subjects, these events of like deep rejection do come up in a lot of these episodes as like heel turn moments for people. So I'm just curious, your thoughts, your read on it of was this gradual? Was it kind of the dam broke and here he is gargling Republican talking points? What happened?
I think it happened very gradually and then all at once, if that makes sense. So 2018, like you said, like he joined Substack, and he's still writing for Rolling Stone, but he finds a loophole in his contract. And the loophole is this: he can write on Substack, and he can write a book on Substack, and he can write it in a serial form, and that will not clash with what he's doing for Rolling Stone. So that's what he does. And he writes this book called Hate Incorporated. And the general thesis of Hate Incorporated is that liberal and conservative media have done equal levels of damage to the country.
That's a take.
The cover is Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow.
Both sides do it.
Both sides do it. Now, look, if you want to say that at this point in American history, right, that like Rachel Maddow was doing the same level of damage to her audience's brains as Sean Hannity was doing to his audience's brains, I'm willing to entertain that, and I think you could make an argument for it. But if you're going to make the argument that MSNBC is doing as much damage to the world as Fox News is, I'm sorry, I just don't think that makes sense. What planet are you on?
I should say also, Rachel Maddow was particularly egregious during Russiagate, as we discussed there. But if you see like her recent things. I think she does Mondays and stuff like that. I mean, most of the time she's reporting on things that are real about that. She's compiling a lot of things that happened around the Trump administration that would be interesting to our audience. There's good research and reporting in it, and it doesn't have that same conspiratorial flavor that the first iteration of Trump had during coverage. So it's possible that she heard some of the feedback and adjusted. I'm not sure if that's the case. I don't watch her every week or anything like that, but from what I've seen, I don't see Sean Hannity changing or trying to, adapt to any kind of feedback.
No, and I'd also say that, before she went all in on Russia in kind of the latter half of 2016 or last quarter of 16, the stuff that she was mostly doing was comparing Trump kind of historically to segregationist figures and stuff like that, which I think is fine.
That's a good point.
Even accurate. Yeah. So, but he writes this book, and I think that, and I remember reading it, and I remember reading it and thinking two things. Like, the first thing I remember thinking was like, this guy needs an editor really badly. Like, really, like, and I'm not saying that
every writer needs an editor. I need an editor. God,
I mean, I'm saying to be a little bit bitchy, but yeah, I need an editor. Like, without an editor, like, my writing is not very good. If you get to the point where you think you don't need an editor, I think that's when you need one the most, quite honestly. Yeah. Like, and this book is an example of that. Like, it really shows that, he wrote it himself on Substack and didn't really have a lot of editor oversight. And the reason I bring that up is just kind of as a callback to what I was saying earlier about him. But also, the second thing that I noticed about was that, it was making this argument that I just didn't think was particularly legitimate, that both sides do it and both sides are bad. So I think that is something that has kind of carried through even to now, where he still kind of says this kind of stuff on occasion, when he will occasionally criticize conservatives at this point. But that book comes out in 2019. We're revving up to the 2020 election, and then COVID hits, and this is when Matt loses his mind.
I'll just read a 2020 tweet from Matt.
Yeah.
If woke leftists spent more time arguing against the war and less time trying to punish speech infractions, I'd be a lot less hostile to them.
Yeah, that was a reply to somebody who was talking about that general topic. But I think it's interesting, that it's just this sort of self-justification of the obsession, right? Where it's just like, these censorious people are trying to ban Hitler 1488 on Twitter, but couldn't they have done it the way we did it in our day when we were going against the Iraq War and so forth? Which I guess we can talk about that context later when a genocide takes center stage.
Yeah, and to be fair to Matt here, around 2019, 2020, there was a lot of stuff being taken offline. A lot of the platforms, Twitter before Elon Musk bought it, Facebook, YouTube, were in response to what was happening in the world, the rise of movements like QAnon, the string of white supremacist mass shootings. I mean, just so much crazy shit that seemed to be, it's like every terrible thing that happened, now their company is in the news of wow, so this just festered here for a year and nobody noticed anything or said anything. A lot of these platforms were developing these policies, trying to think about that. Also, in wake of the 2016 election, a lot of platforms were also thinking about foreign disinformation, misinformation campaigns, and trying to inoculate against that kind of thing, so Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have to get dragged in front of Congress and look like a lizard person in front of the American public, right? So it's not like it was only based Pepe 1488. There was a lot of stuff being taken offline, and not everybody felt great about it. But what Matt and so many people on the right did was kind of take it a step far, used it to justify a political belief rather than attacking it on itself, if that makes sense. That's my read of it.
It does make sense, and I think that the other thing is that 2020, especially during lockdown, was the most online people have ever been.
Some people never stopped, and some people made a podcast about it called Posting Through It.
Exactly. See, some good came out of it, but so that's kind of the scenario that he's responding to, like less time trying to punish speech infractions. I mean, this is like it just seems so crazy. Like, why would you care that, you know, Pepe 1488 got like taken offline? But of course, also what he's saying here is that like there's pushback on the platforms for allowing disinformation about COVID and disinformation about COVID cures that, you know, could maybe harm people, or, you know, you can take different positions on whether or not that's good or acceptable or, you know, censorious or not. But I think that basing your entire political belief, as you say, Jared, is like not really like where I would go with this. And it is for him, especially like COVID and vaccines and stuff like that. He goes off the deep end on this stuff. Specifically, basically becomes an anti-vaxxer by the time 2020 is over.
Yeah, he uses it to justify all this resentment towards the left, because the right at that time is like, I don't know, why don't you eat horse medication and give that a shot instead of taking a vaccine? And the left is like, that is bad. People might get hurt. Maybe that shouldn't be a viral post. I don't think this is a particularly slick veil over Taibbi's beliefs here.
And before we just get into the Twitter files and the censorship industrial complex thing a little bit deeper here, I just want to point out that there is this sort of niche industry that's kind of backed by Silicon Valley money, really, this little journalism field, right? This kind of anti-woke thing starts popping up. And you have a lot of people are doing the same thing Taibbi's doing. It's not like he's the one guy who started on the left and went right. But there's Batya Ungar-Sargon, who's sort of a late bloomer in that now. She's like got her own TV show and everything. And Jesse Singal. These are like different. They're all different from Taibbi, but they're all the same kind of folks in many ways. They kind of were in a liberally space, were criticized, and then, you know, kind of retreated to a very reactionary position.
Yeah, I think Taibbi stands out because Taibbi had a reputation and some legitimate chops, you know, that a lot of these folks simply just don't have on the page.
Yeah, he has that, and he, you know, I was going to like mention people like Jimmy Dore, but they're, you know, they disqualify themselves the minute that they open their mouths. But yeah, this kind of like general, it had already started in the alternative media, I think, after 2016, and had been building for a while, and then 2020 really opened the door for this. So Matt, by the end of 2020, has really established himself as at least like a right-wing friendly voice, if not just a total right-wing voice. At this point, like people like the transphobia and the anti-vax stuff, we didn't really get into transphobia, but it becomes an increasing concern for him, like other people's personal lives. In the same, and the reason that I put it that way is because a lot of his writing about cultural issues used to be against this, used to be against people like inserting themselves into people's personal lives. And then all of a sudden, like now he wants to do that because of this trans issue, that he just doesn't like trans people for whatever reason. It's completely irrelevant what the reason is. I mean, I think we've all seen this happen with figures, but that being a critic of the left who came from the left, who doesn't like trans people and has questions about COVID and the vaccine, put him perfectly in line with the politics of Silicon Valley right-wingers at the time. You know, people like Mark Andreessen and specifically Elon Musk, who buys Twitter, and over a number of events that we don't really have time to get into, but basically it's just one PR nightmare after another because the man is an idiot. And he decides like a good way to kind of take the heat off of him is to release certain internal documents to a friendly reporter who will then report the stuff out on Twitter, and on Twitter first at least, and do so in a way that will make Elon look good.
These were known as the Twitter files. So if the Rolling Stone years were a climax of his notoriety in left-wing spaces, the Twitter files will become the climax of his notoriety in right-wing spaces and kind of set him up to where he's landed today. It seems like he's still coasting on that. So, like you said, the Twitter files were a collection of internal documents, like emails, screenshots of dashboards and stuff that were handed off to Taibbi, handed off to people like Barry Weiss. There was kind of this hand-selected group of reporters. Some of them were flown out to Twitter's headquarters in Silicon Valley, where they were given this material, and like you said, they could report on it. They could write about it. They had to post it as a Twitter thread first, but then they could, post it elsewhere. And immediately this started raising a lot of questions. To his credit, Lee Fang, I'm not the biggest fan of Lee's, but like to his credit here, actually did confirm in his reporting what a lot of folks suspected as these started to come out, which is that these writers were not invited into Twitter to have a poke around, but that these were actually, kind of packaged up with a bow on top for them. It was like, here you go, Matt. Here's something that we would like you to report. So
sorry, I just want to say this is really important, because what happened was that when Matt first started reporting this stuff out, he said, I'm not going to tell you anything about how like this, I'm not going to tell you who my source was, because that would be exposing my source, which is like, we know who it was, man. But okay, it was obviously Elon, but he doesn't want to reveal that for some reason. He then he tries to play coy with it. Weiss, I think, does the same thing, but because Lee is writing for The Intercept at the time, they have certain standards. And so Lee in his article finally says, yes, I didn't have unfettered access. I was allowed to look. I was allowed to look through whatever I wanted within what they gave me. But I would have to ask to look at things, and then they would decide like whether or not I could look at it. So that was the context that this stuff came from. And it's important to note that not only did Matt not come out with this and be honest about that, but he also as I said, he never said that it was Elon until of course we find out later. But he also, his first article is about the Hunter Biden laptop story, which is this right-wing fever dream. It's the thing that leads Glenn to leave The Intercept. Basically, this guy reports that he has Hunter Biden's laptop. He says that that there's some information on it. It comes out right before the 2020 election. It's Joe Biden versus Trump. It's such an obvious rat fuck that pretty much nobody will touch it. And even and the thing with what happened with Glenn is that he wanted to write about it, but the Intercept's editors actually said we can't let you we don't know where this came from. It later turned out, I think, that it was actually accurate, but that's irrelevant to this, because at the time they had no way to know. All they knew was that Rudy Giuliani basically had given this to the New York Post.
Yeah. The story was Hunter Biden left his laptop at a repair shop. Something. Now Rudy Giuliani has it. Rudy Giuliani not exactly being the most straight shooting political guy in the Trump years for sure. But yeah, so when this story comes out, I think it's the New York Post gets it first. They're the ones, they're shopping the story around. The New York Post, being a tabloid, they're just like, fuck it, let's go. They run a story, and a lot of tech platforms, including Twitter, including Facebook, pump the brakes on it. And they do it, I want to say it was just for a day or two.
They suppressed the link, I believe, for less than a day. I think it was 16 hours.
Yeah, so they suppressed the link. It is not directing out on their platforms, trying to curb the spread of the story. And like I said earlier, these are platforms that have been trying to figure out the content moderation question, which they've since basically given up on at this point. But at the time, they're still thinking about it. They're getting these warnings from, these briefings from places like the FBI and whatever that are just hey, listen, we think, Russia is going to try to circulate stuff again. We think, these kind of things are out here. Can you help us keep an eye on it? And out of an abundance of caution, they pump the brakes on distribution of this New York Post story. And that sends right-wing media, right-wing politicians absolutely AWOL. To them, this was proof that big tech was in the pocket of the Biden campaign and was censoring content to achieve a political end that was anti-Trump. This was like something they had said for years, but this was like, to them, in their eyes, this is like, aha, we've got the smoking gun now.
How does he justify what you just mentioned, Jared? It is very clearly used, like this is a propaganda campaign. Anybody can see why they're being released. It's a propaganda campaign to justify this creepy, unpleasant takeover of a social media platform to control the flow of information and to say, like, look, the bad guys were bad and we need people to help paint that picture so that way other people warm up to X, because everybody's getting really mad about X right now and we needed to stay doing what it does. Right. So we need people to feel that way. And we need somebody to come out there and make the old regime, which was problematic, no doubt, look completely heinous. And then they come into the arms of Elon Musk. That's a crazy thing compared to his old branding as a reporter.
Well, I think the way that he justifies it is kind of related to like what Jared was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop story and this kind of like right-wing fever dream about it, right? Like they decided that this was the greatest moment of censorship imaginable. Because like instead of it being somebody trying to rat fuck Biden, now it was that these social media platforms were trying to rat fuck Trump, right? So now it's like this huge like thing about censorship, and then so that's why I think that's why he comes out with this as the first story. He just embraces this. I mean, he talks about Trump's suspension from Twitter, conversations between the FBI and Twitter. Like that's I think that's interesting. I think this stuff. Here's the thing that sucks about it is that like the documents are interesting. It is interesting to see how a social media company makes these decisions. It is interesting to see how a social media company talks to the government about how they make these decisions. Like that stuff is interesting. It is worth it. It is not, however, on par with the Snowden leaks. And that is how he tried to like project it. He tried to basically say like this is like the new huge, like this is going to be a huge revelation on par with that. This is an information regime, the censorship industrial complex, and the thing is, it just doesn't land because it's
but
not.
It's not
real.
even like the revelation, like the secret internal documents of a local police station involved in corruption in many ways. It's interesting for sure. And it's interesting probably to be folded into a book about Twitter and like, how it evolved into a kind of, a pretty hate machine, which is what it is now. No offense, Trent Reznor. But I mean, like it is really not that, it's not that impactful. It's interesting for sure.
The quote that you brought up before is that it's a red flag if the call is coming from the official as opposed to the reporter calling the officials. The average intelligence official wouldn't stop to tell you if your child was on fire. When they start cold calling agencies and or rotating scoops by doling them out to different outlets and papers each week, that's a huge red flag. Now, the great thing about this is that on the Lever News podcast, David Sirota and Jordan Ull had interviewed Taibbi, and Ull read this quote to him and said, "Isn't that what you're doing?" And Taibbi freaked out, absolutely lost it on him.
So Matt would go on to publish ultimately 19 installments of the Twitter files. He'd cover Trump's suspension from Twitter after the Capitol riot, conversations like you mentioned, Owen, between the FBI and Twitter, COVID-19 issues, communications from nonprofit groups that were concerned with election disinformation. That's where one of my former employers comes in. I didn't work on the project they took a big issue with, the Election Integrity Project. I was off doing my own thing in extremism land, but I saw people that I worked with fucking hauled in front of Congress and shit, which is very weird. But throughout this, and you also mentioned this, Owen, or Mike, maybe you did, Matt has managed to botch the facts about this supposed censorship industrial complex. And when he's called out on it, he just kind of digs his heels in. He doesn't correct himself. In my opinion, that right there is enough to disqualify calling what he does journalism. I'm a very opinionated person, outspoken person. I'll tell you what I think. But if I get facts wrong, I will like do a backflip to correct myself because I was taught that that's pretty important when you're doing journalism. But I want to play a clip just because I think it exemplifies this really well. Mehdi Hassan, who we had on the show earlier this year, actually called out Matt on these factual inaccuracies in an interview that went viral at the time.
After the
That's what your words. You say, to quote you, after public uproar, pause the Orwellian Disinformation Governance Board, Stanford created the EIP. That's wrong.
Well, that's what they say.
You could check. You don't need sources, Matt. You could check the EIP website. It says it was created in 2020.
Well, that's the date that I just said.
And the Disinformation Board was 2022.
Okay. All right. Well, then that is an error.
So in April 2023, around this time, Elon Musk, Matt Taibbi's source for the Twitter files, is censoring links to Substack. One might say the same, not to the same degree, but, for somebody so concerned about the New York Post getting adequate web traffic for their story, Elon Musk starts basically penalizing posts that have outbound links to Substack. And that's a problem for Matt because Matt is publishing on Substack. And he claims in April 2023, he's leaving Twitter. Mike, did Matt leave Twitter?
No.
What a surprise.
He did receive a Fell For It Again award.
Yeah. The next year, in 2024, Taibbi would reveal that him and Elon Musk had a severe falling out. They do not like each other anymore. Matt says that Elon Musk messaged him, quote, "You are dead to me. Please get off Twitter and just stay on Substack." I mean, even then, this is maybe a tell of the audience that Matt had developed and his awareness of that audience at this time, where even in posting that, even in like kind of trying to make some hay out of this feud with Elon Musk, he still kind of goes out of his way, right, Owen, to be like, but just to be clear, I'm not like attacking Elon, okay? So wherever you read that is not true.
Yeah, I mean, that was his MO the entire time. These messages were from April 2023, I think an hour before he said he was leaving Twitter. And the one thing that he revealed that he sent to Musk was like, Elon, I've repeatedly refused to criticize you, which is just disqualifying. It's just totally disqualifying. And
refused.
I think
refused is an interesting word there.
I remember watching his Substack subscribers increase as the first Twitter files thing was coming out. I mean, they were all, I assume that they were mostly conservatives. He was promoting it as if it was like there were going to be more revelations, help us do this work kind of thing. Barry Weiss did the same thing. And I think that, for him, Twitter and Substack being tied together was just such an important part of his revenue. And so when basically what Musk has done to Substack links on Twitter is that now they don't even make a preview. You can't open them in app. And the reason he did this is because Substack made this little Twitter knockoff thing. It's just, I mean, it's like Musk is the smallest man alive until you see Taibbi's text to him, and then Taibbi's the smallest man alive, and then you remember what it's about, and Musk is small. I mean, they're just
and also
tiny,
Barry
tiny
Weiss in the middle of this. I mean, she will.
Hey, Mike, be careful. You're talking about the editor-in-chief of CBS News here.
Oh, but she's going to get her own who the hell is, I'm sure, at some point.
I mean, well, Barry's smart, though. I mean, that's the big difference between her and Matt. Barry's smart. Matt's not. And so Barry is able to spin getting subscriptions from Substack off of doing a couple of Twitter files. She sees where things are going with Musk's behavior, and she leaves Twitter, or she doesn't leave Twitter, but she cashes out of the Twitter files She rebrands as the Free Press, and she says we're going to do work. And she gets to basically say, like, his Musk's censorship being the reason that she was doing it. She gets to maintain some mainstream credibility. I mean, she's just a lot smarter in knowing kind of when to cut bait on this stuff, which Matt did. Matt wanted to keep on doing it for forever,
So the Twitter files, another thing to know about that is that it made him into a star witness for Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Matt Taibbi. I'm the editor of the independent site Racket, and I've been covering digital censorship issues since 2018, the fictional ones. On March 14th, 2016, Barack Obama signed Executive Order.
In March 2023, he testified before the House Judiciary Committee about his Twitter files post. He testified again that November about the government's interactions with social media companies. In February, April, and September this year, he has appeared before Congress, mostly still living on the Twitter file stuff, although he recently got into that. I'll be honest, I haven't been paying much attention. Whatever that shit is that Republicans were obsessed with, where it's like, this is proof the government was spying on us. And now some of them are trying to sue the government for money, the same way Trump's doing, where he's like, now that I control the government, I'm going to demand a multi-million-dollar settlement for crimes against me.
Yeah, they found. I think he did find one thing that seemed interesting. I didn't really look too into it, but like Tulsi Gabbard was like on the no-fly list or something, which seems crazy to me. Like she was before, not now, but like before. It's like that's kind of wild for a member of the military who was doing special ops in Africa as recently as a few years ago.
No-fly list to the federal government. It's a big chunk for her.
Yeah, so I mean, before Congress, his shtick is that he was like, and we've seen this so many times. He's the good liberal, but the left just like went too crazy, got too censorious, got too woke, whatever, and he basically exists there to validate whatever the House Republicans are saying, whatever they are trying to claim about tech companies, whatever they're trying to claim about nonprofits. That sort of thing. We got to keep it moving here, but there's something else here on April 1st, 2025, April Fool's Day. U.S. Representative Sidney Kemlager-Dove accused Taibbi of being a serial sexual harasser. Oh, and tell me about this, because Matt really lost it. And to be fair, this is a member of Congress calling you this in committee. I mean, I would probably lose it too if I went before Congress and someone was like, "This guy's a sex pest." I'd be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
I don't think that this was like the smartest thing to do because it was. I don't really think she can back it up. But serial sexual harasser is a pretty strong claim. However, it's not the kind of claim that's going to stand up to a $10 million libel suit. I mean, under normal circumstances with the normal legal system, who knows? Maybe it'll work. But what's frustrating for me when I watch these hearings that he's on is that the Democrats just always whiff on attacking him.
Yeah,
right.
They don't know what to do with him. Yeah,
they just don't understand him. They don't understand what they're actually dealing with. And also, I would say for folks who cover the right and have been doing it for a long time, the threat of lawsuit looms with almost everything you say. And that's why you use language that is specific, right? Where you'd be like, some people said this about you on a forum, and that will sound bad enough. You don't need to necessarily make a broad claim like that.
We'll have to leave that there. With the time we've got left, I want to talk just a little bit about what Matt is up to these days. Like I said, he's still doing the Republican star witness thing on Capitol Hill. He's hosting a podcast called America This Week with Walter Kern. He's mostly punching left. He punches right occasionally, mostly on free speech issues, but the theme is still largely Republicans are bad, but Democrats are worse. And there's a 2024 article, also in New York Magazine, another one, where Taibbi tried to explain his method, his approach. And the way that I read this is that he sees Republicans, even now seemingly, as they have a vice grip on the federal government as underdogs, in a way. This is what he said to New York Magazine. The Democrats' ambitions are significantly more dangerous than those of the Republicans. From digital surveillance to censorship to making intel and enforcement agencies central players in domestic governance, all plans being executed globally as well as in our one country. They are thinking on a much bigger and more dangerous scale than the Republicans. And then also from that article, again, this is 2024, the Republicans have very little institutional power nationally. It is not their point of view prevailing in schools, on campuses, in newsrooms, parentheses, where over 90% of working reporters vote blue, and especially in the intelligence and military apparatus, which has openly aligned itself with Democrats. Even if Donald Trump were a threat to democracy, he lacks the institutional pull to do much damage, which can't be said of Democrats. Talk about
Insane.
shit that
I'm
doesn't
sorry.
age well.
But even then, just completely insane. I'm sorry. The intelligence and military apparatus has openly aligned itself with Democrats.
You've got to be kidding.
What
right?
are you talking about, man? What are you talking?
The famously liberal institution, the Central Intelligence Agency.
It's just so clear that like he and I think Glenn as well. I know we're not talking about Glenn, but just to bring him up as another example of this. I mean, like they really seem to think that the institutions of the federal government are completely controlled by the Democratic Party and by liberals, and that the Republicans are the last possible bulwark against like them just taking over everything. And I don't even know like what it looks. It's just so frustrating to read this stuff because it's so crazy and it's not reality.
Even in 2025, when the administration is out there blowing up boats randomly, they don't seem to have any kind of like the idea of a deep state is gone. They seem to have almost total control over everything.
I will also just say this is like a super intellectually lazy argument. You don't even put yourself in a position of trying to defend Republicans. You just say, but think about, can you imagine? Okay, sure, I just kicked the dog, but like, can you imagine the boogeyman under your bed? Think of what he would do to the dog. Oh my God. The boogeyman would eat the dog. Like, it completely is glazing over the fact you just kicked a dog, right? It's probably not a great way of explaining that, but
no, I think that's right. And I think the other thing too is, and I know we have a couple other things to run through, so I'm just going to say this as kind of like a general statement about like his writing on Substack and his Twitter account now. Okay, so it does kind of three things, right? It plays the hits for the Twitter files. It plays the hits for the anti-vax stuff. And then the other thing is that it just does is all of this culture war stuff against Democrats. And if there's something in the news, like about, say, Donald Trump, that's negative, he just ignores it. He just straight up ignores it and puts out stuff. Right now, November 13th, 10:49 p.m. Yesterday, the House Democrats and the House Oversight Democrats released all of these files, files related to Jeffrey Epstein, where he talks about his relationship with Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Matt Taibbi, somebody who covers politics, someone who is interested in powerful people, right? His most recent tweet is from November 12th at 9:55 a.m., so before this stuff was released. And it's about the I've Had It podcasters, who are these two blonde women from the South who are, basically kind of like lefty liberal Democrats who have gotten a following over the last year for kind of their type of kind of confrontational, I guess, like liberalism, right? Like this is what he's writing about. And he's not writing about it. He's not writing about Epstein because the thing about Epstein right now is that it's reflecting poorly on Trump. And he knows that his audience is like partisan Republicans. So there's absolutely no way that he's going to do that. And I think that just kind of like really sums up where he's at.
What I've also seen is him sort of throwing shade at Mamdani right? I heard a podcast with him and Walter Kern, and just sort of trying to whatever they were talking about there. And then I read the top part of his Substack about it, and it was just sort of like, well, sort of saying, well, the political institutions failed and Mamdani won, and that sort of thing. No recognition of the fact that Mamdani would be the exact type of person he would have been championing in New York at the time of the financial crisis,
or even 6 years ago. You get, or 6 or 7 years ago, you could see him at least like being somewhat more open to it. But he's just become a crank. I think that's what it is. He's just become a crank, and if he was just like sitting on his porch being a ludicrous asshole, like I don't think this would really matter. But it's the fact that he has an audience and he's still able to kind of funnel people into this right wing stuff. Like I wrote about in January at The Nation, I wrote about Taibbi's connections with the Mahab movement and like all of these like far right conspiracy theorists.
Oh yeah,
he did
wasn't there like a big rally on the National Mall that he?
So he goes to the Rescue the Republic rally. He's with Tulsi Gabbard, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, this one I remember
RFK
this.
Jr.
Yeah,
he says, "I grew up a liberal Democrat and can't remember having even most of the same beliefs as my friends. Now millions of alleged intellectuals claim identical beliefs about vast ranges of issues." It was not a huge rally. There was not.
Yeah, it was
not
it was like kind of a dud.
This was before the election, and then on the eve of the election, he worked with the Glenn Beck's The Blaze on an article, just going over like the Glenn Beck, who he referred to in 2011 as a screeching media dillweed.
He was right, but
and then like it's just all like reactionary politics. He was joyful about the Trump White House banning the Associated Press because they wouldn't follow the president's renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. The once great AP became journalism's word police, and humorously is now claiming to be a victim of censorship. It's like, I mean, okay. I don't even know where to start with that sentence. Like, word police is ridiculous because they didn't automatically want to change it to the Gulf of America and how they were writing about it. But also, like, humorously is now clear. I mean, he's giving this so much more importance than it deserves because that's all that he has. It's just like this relentless culture warrior stuff. And I think that it's him giving all of this stuff so much importance. And I count I've had it podcast ladies with this as well, right? That I just mentioned. He gives this stuff so much importance. But when it comes to Republicans, like cutting down on people's free speech over Palestine, right? Which he at least doesn't have really much of a position on, or I think kind of softly supports. Or if it's, the GOP or the Trump White House doing putting forward any number of laws that restrict people's personal freedoms and make their lives harder, he just has nothing to say about it. It's not that he even endorses it. He just doesn't even talk about it. All that matters is just this relentless culture war bullshit.
I want to hit pause and rewind real quick about the Israel-Palestine stuff. Can you say more about that? You have here in the show notes stuff about Barry Weiss. I'm curious for you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think Taibbi and Barry are, if not like close friends, they're certainly aligned on a lot of things. Taibbi's speeches and, him getting awards from, kind of like marginal fringe right-wing groups for his reporting have been reposted in the free press. Barry has given him space to do this. So obviously he does most of his writing on his own Substack. So she's just like reposting his speeches, but they're obviously aligned on a lot of this stuff. They did the Twitter files together, or, quote unquote together, whatever. And October 6th, 2023, Matt goes on Gutfeld, where he's, serenaded by Greg, and, he's joking around with him. And then, of course, October 7th is the next day. And then 2 weeks after that, 2 or 3 weeks after that, he goes on to Newsmax, which is like this gutter right-wing channel that's like, lower. It's really just garbage. I mean, I'm sure that most of your audience knows what Newsmax is. And in that appearance, he basically says that student protesters against what Israel's doing in Palestine are kind of like almost like the victims of their professors who are not teaching them how to think, but teaching them what to think. And it's just basically
that's the right-wing anti-woke line. That is what Dave Rubin would say. That is what Barry Weiss would say.
I mean, it's almost explicitly like what Barry would say. Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. Yeah.
Helping to set up, of course, the Trump's pressure campaign on universities, like not far after that.
I mean, I think it's one of the only things that he really didn't ever criticize Biden on was his response to the student protesters and to Israel and Palestine in general. And he's been called out about that a lot. I mean, I think he's lost a lot of supporters who were with him up until 2023, like Brianna Joy Gray, who I'm not a fan of, and she's not a fan of me, but like she's certainly gone after him a lot. Or Zed Jelani is another one who has gone after him about this. And he has essentially said that if you criticize his lack of a stance or lack of speaking out about free speech related to Palestine or about the genocide in Gaza, that you're engaged in censorship, because he's not going to play your game. Basically, he's like trying to take that high ground on that. And I think that that's just obviously bullshit. And I also think that it's self-serving, because he has this relationship with Barry Weiss in general where he seems to be transparently riding her coattails. He never criticizes her. He has nothing to say about her that's negative. They work together. It just seems like he wants a job, I guess, at CBS, or he at least wants to stay on her good side, which, I mean, she's a very smart and savvy person. Has had a huge level of success for how little talent at actual journalism
she's the mother of the anti-woke movement in many ways.
I mean, I want to be clear. She's very talented at getting rich people to give her money and power. I do think
she has that same stripe that JD Vance has, where it's like hillbilly elegy, whatever, fine book. But what JD Vance is really good at is serenading the rich and powerful, which is what Barry Weiss does. And we're
100%.
learning more and more these days just how far that can get you in media, as so much of it crumbles to the ground.
I mean, here's the thing is that, like, I mean, I hate to say this, but I do kind of respect that about her. She has zero principles. She has no morals at all. She knows what she wants, and what she wants is to have power, and she's getting it.
All right, folks. Well, if you've made it this far, you've been with us for a couple hours now talking about Matt Taibbi. We've learned a lot thanks to our guest, Eoin Higgins. We're going to put a link to Owen's book, which you absolutely should go get. It's about time to call it a wrap on this one, so we're going to end it how we end all of our Who the Hell episodes. Mike?
Yes.
After everything we've learned, all the knowledge that Eoin has shared with us here today, who the hell is Matt Taibbi?
Well, just one point I've been playing around with in my head, which is this year, maybe another year, it goes by, and we wouldn't even be able to do this podcast anymore, because the reason why Taibbi is of interest is because people knew him from before his change. And for an entire generation that's growing up, he's just going to be some crank blogger.
Yeah.
And he really, who is not really quite like, he's not like the Daily Stormer, right? It's not like, oh my God, he's stirring up like, terror attacks all over the country. He's not that at all. He's a crank blogger with a rightward perspective now. What makes him interesting is his heel turn. And ultimately what the heel turn says to me is this is a guy with not many principles who valued, or his perception of success, I should say, was really based around financial success and attention. And I think that's where he wound up the way he was ultimately, because if his ultimate value, his primary value, was to deliver journalism that speaks truth, speaks truth for the people against the powerful, we never would have been here. And he's lost all credibility. But Jared, who the hell is Matt Taibbi to you?
I think I've got a pretty similar take. When I was listening to Eoin tell us about his early life and especially the parts where he would talk about himself, and even today, how his sort of self-story, he strikes me as somebody who considers himself very important. And before he even had his career off the ground, seemed to think of himself that way. And I think that he is chasing the money, of course, but also I think a lot of it it strikes me at least as ego driven, right? He is taking the angle, doing whatever he can do to fulfill this drive or to chase this dragon of wanting to feel important to the public. And I think that was like the big motivator on the Twitter files, why he tried to keep, the air of mystique going around it for a little bit. So yeah, in addition to the money that he's chasing, I also think he is, just chasing any opportunity that can increase his profile, even if it's not with the audience that maybe he thought he was going to get it with initially. But that's two takes from two podcast hosts. What do we know? Eoin Higgins. Who the hell is Matt Taibbi?
I think you guys are both right. For me, because I think because I wrote a book about him and I've been thinking about him so much over the last few years because of that. I try to be as empathetic as possible to anybody I write about, honestly.
It's good practice, yeah.
To whatever extent I can. And there's a lot of Matt's story that I think is relatable and something that I can feel empathy for, being a super rebellious teenager, angering people with your writing, putting yourself out there in ways that will make people think, hopefully. I mean, like, these are things that I, hope that I do at times, but I think that where Matt really seems to have fallen off is just what you were saying about this endless drive for success that has led him down, I think, what is kind of like a pretty dark path. And I think there's some kind of sadness to his specific story, because I think that for him, he's sold out like any possible principle that he may have had for access to power. And where that's left him is not having he doesn't really have anywhere to go. Someone like Greenwald can still pivot on some things and still have some credibility with his former audience because he's willing to kind of be a contrarian. And I think people like that. Some people like that, right? Barry is able to pivot from quitting the New York Times in a huff to founding the Free Press to being the editor-in-chief of CBS. And Matt was able to become kind of, like you were saying, like the Hunter S. Thompson, right, of his generation. And then that just kind of turned into whatever this is, this kind of sycophantic, partisan Republican politics that he does now. And I think that there is a certain cautionary tale here, and it would be kind of just something to kind of look at and think, wow, this is kind of sad and a cautionary tale. But the fact that he had such a huge audience before, and the fact that he can funnel this audience into the right wing and act as a gateway drug to it, is why I think that what he does is actively harmful. I don't know if he's even able to have the self-awareness to realize that. But at this point, I don't even know if it matters, because I don't know if he can really pull himself back from the brink of like where he's at. And I think that it's just very unfortunate to see what's happened here. And I think that his story is kind of a story of falling for this stuff because of fame and trying to, chase success and trying to see like how he can pivot on this stuff. And I think it's also a story of self-radicalization as well. And I think just don't be that online, I guess.
And look, what about Mahmoud Khalil in terms of censorship? Right, there's been this tremendous. Right, you made your career on censorship. You can't even really talk about it. And to the point about the anti-woke stuff, this is something that Jared and I have we started talking a discussion about this around Jesse Singal. We did a very little thing on one of our premium episodes, just because he came up. And I think it's something we're still pouring over, just where these guys go from here, because I really think it is they have reached in many ways a dead end.
Yeah.
I
Where do you go when your posture is no longer against power, right? Like what Taibbi said in 2024, his whole argument was like, well, Democrats have the power, so that's why I focus on them so much. But what now? That's not true anymore. I mean, that's extremely not true anymore. So instead, you just become a toady for the most powerful people on the planet, for the commander of the largest army on Earth.
yeah.
Like, I don't know.
What I think that the thing is, though, that it every little bit helps, right? Giving it, he's giving them credibility, even if it's just a little bit with just a few people. He's still giving them some credibility, and I think that that's just.
If I may end this episode quoting Laura Ingraham, I think maybe Matt should have stayed in Mongolia and shut up and dribbled.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Adios.